Hey, Jerry.
Hi, Tanya.
I have found one of the best stories there is. And you know how I love the story.
Oh, I'm being interviewed today?
No, not you.
No.
We've done your story. The trial to triumph story. So Chris and I met down in Houston at my real job with Phenomenal Products, and we got to talking, and I said, hey, you'd be great for the Sober on Purpose podcast, because those trial to triumphs, especially this time of year, I don't know if it's like this at your house, Chris, it's really gray where we are, and there can be a lot of depression after the holidays, and it can be a super big struggle. So we're just going to let him take it away. Chris, we sometimes will talk over you and stumble on ourselves, but that's part of the joy of just being freewheeling and having fun with this. So please share with us how it started, and now you are a successful business owner. If I understand correctly, you're getting married, you're hiring people, you're booked several months out. I mean, life is good right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So I kind of just naturally came into the trades. My dad was a tile installer his whole life, and his dad and my uncles and my brothers are, and so everybody just kind of is in tile. So I started working for my dad in the summers as a kid, and then in turned 17, I actually graduated early, and then just went straight to working with him. And then over the years, me and my brother would we started a business, but not really, like we technically had a business, but we would kind of only do a job every, once a month or something like that. Sometimes not even that often. And we kind of, I don't know, halfway in, halfway out, started our own business. But as time went on, that business kind of changed and we took it a little more seriously. And then at a certain point in my life, I just decided that I was going to put everything I have into the business. And yeah, like you said, now I'm pretty much constantly booked out a few months. I'm hiring people. I just got a second truck. Yeah, and things have been growing almost for the last 3-4 years. I think we've almost doubled our previous year.
Wow.
Fabulous. But things were not always that way.
Definitely not. No.
So tell us about the trials.
So whenever I was younger, I kind of, I got into smoking weed and stuff like that in high school and drinking when I was, underage. Um, and it just kind of seemed normal to me because like my dad and my uncles, they're all construction workers and my dad, he just drank, but he drank every day. My grandpa did, my uncles did. And so just kind of naturally came into that. My brother, he's actually my older brother, 3 years older. And I really looked up to him, even if he was doing the dumbest thing in the world, I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. So, he was getting into stuff like that. And so I just kind of followed his lead, and that's probably why we never really took the business seriously. We pretty much just wanted to like have a good time and work enough to pay for our bills and whatever else we wanted to do, and then that was it. We didn't want to save any extra money. We didn't want to make any extra money. We just wanted to work bare minimum. And so yeah, just basically ran like that for years. Um, it's crazy to think about because I mean back then we used to make in a year what the company makes now in a month. Honestly, my company now probably makes more in a month than we made in a year.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I said, we were just kind of, willy-nilly with it, never really taking it seriously.
Does that sound familiar to you?
Kind of my story. Can I go next?
Yeah, it's actually
Jerry came out to
sort
Colorado to ski, theoretically.
Yeah. So, tell us about what happened from the time that you and your brother had this kind of haphazard holding it together on a wing and a prayer business. Then what happened?
So at a certain point, we actually both went and worked for a company called the Grout Doctor, and they just do like stone restoration, tile and grout cleaning, and like a little bit of tile installation. And at that point, right before that happened, I found out that I have a son. So I didn't know my son until he was 7 years old. And as I was growing up, or sorry, as he was growing up, I talked to his mom when,
As both of you were growing up,
yeah,
right?
really. Yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, really, I didn't even grow up until I met him pretty much. But as he was growing up, I would like kind of go onto his mom's social media because I knew the timing was right, but when I talked to her about it when she was pregnant, she said, "No, he's got a dad." Um, Turns out that they both knew that he wasn't the real father, but they just kind of stayed together because I guess through a separation is when me and his mom linked up, and then they got back together after that. But he just looked so much like me as a baby, and so every year, 2 years, I'd go look, and finally he was 7, and I was like, this kid looks too much like me, and my brother was like, you need to ask her about it.
Mm.
So I reached out and asked for a paternity test, and then turns out he was my son, and so we started working for this other guy uh, who had a good business, and we made fairly good money. And my brother ended up he was still kind of messing around with drugs and stuff at that point, and
Had you
so
quit? Were you able to quit
yeah,
previously?
yeah, actually.
What was the
Um,
catalyst for that?
So I guess I could probably backtrack a little bit. So my uncle, it was me and my brother's favorite uncle. He went through cancer for about 7 years, and so as a lot of people know, they gives him tons of pain pills.
Mm.
And so he was kind of our fun uncle and our favorite uncle to hang out with, and so we just kind of naturally, I guess, got into doing pain pills with him. And so before you know it, it goes from like once every couple months when you hang out at a certain party, and then all of a sudden we're doing it every day. And that's kind of where all of our money, as meager as it was, that's kind of where all of our money went. And my brother, he he used to say that he would never stop doing drugs. And he wasn't your typical drug addict. He wasn't like begging for money or doing anything like dirty to get drugs, but he just enjoyed doing them and like partying and having a good time. And I never was like that. If I got caught up in something like smoking weed too much as a teenager or when I was doing the pain pills, I wanted to stop.
Oh, I'm
Um,
jealous.
but but anyways, he was always kind of curious as to what heroin would be like. So he tried that, and then I thought it was ridiculous, and I was like, "Man, David, you need to not do that." And somehow just I guess getting desensitized, seeing him a few times do it, I tried it, and then just like the pain pills, next thing you know, we're doing it every day.
Mm.
And we just got to a point. I think we were doing it every day for it wasn't super long. I think it was like 6 to 9 months, but it's still long enough to like to scare the shit out of you.
Yeah.
It locked on, and my brother described it as like a black tar that just grows and grows and grows within you, and it like takes control. And when he said that, it gave me goosebumps. I just got goosebumps.
Mm.
But it totally had us locked in. Like we had no control. We tried to stop a bunch of times, and we would just end up caving after 12, 18 hours, something like that. um, and so finally I actually went to a like a clinic and got Suboxone. They for some reason they wanted us to do that for the next 3 years or some ridiculous amount of time like that. We did it for about a week, if that, and then we just from there cold turkeyed everything. So we just did it long enough to
You,
get the heroin out of our
you
system.
said we, that is that you and your brother?
Yeah, so it was me and my brother, and it, whenever one of us would buy it, the other one would. We lived together our whole life. We
Mhm.
worked together, we played together, all of our friends were together, or we had all the same friends. So
So what was
this
cold
whole
turkey
thing.
like? What was it?
Well, I want to get
Yeah.
back up into Suboxone. That's been a big question in the community, is the what do they call it? Medicated assisted treatment. So
Mhm.
you went and you got it, but you didn't stick with it. What made you say no, not going to stick with this?
Because we didn't want to just jump from one addiction to another. You know,
Yeah.
I understand they say that it's either not addictive or less addictive or something, but
Yeah, they
we
said the
just both
same thing
wanted to
about
be clean.
Vicodin for years.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
and all the Oxycontin and all those things too. So you decided to get off, and what does cold turkey mean for you?
It actually was not bad. Doing that Suboxone, we didn't feel as good during that like week-long process of doing the Suboxone, but once we stopped doing once we got towards the end of that week of Suboxone, I think we might have done like half as much as we were doing before that, which was still a very small amount compared to what
Mhm.
they told us to do. I just think that's ridiculous. But yeah, I think maybe we had a day where we took half as much and then we just stopped. And honestly, it was completely fine. I woke up that next day and went outside, and it was like the colors were just more vivid. The grass was greener, and
That's cool.
it's crazy, but like it literally felt like everything was just so much more vivid, and it went from this gray world to like color again.
How long ago was that?
Now I think it's probably been maybe 6 years, something like
Wow.
that. Yeah,
Wow.
It's a miracle. And
yeah.
any formal emotional groups or anything like that? Any or just chemical assistance?
Yeah, just the Suboxone, and then I mean we kind of leaned on each other during that
Okay.
process. A
Yeah.
lot of times that you know, we'd be candid with each other and like, hey, I kind of feel like doing this again, and the other one would be like, no, don't do it.
Yeah, two are better than one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. So you did that. Then what happened?
So then I can go back to meeting my son. So, it had been, I don't know, maybe a year after we had gotten clean. And that's when I met my son. And then let's see. So yeah, it was actually shortly after I met my son that we started working for that other tile and grout company. Um, and then at that point, I had no urges at all. I never wanted to do it again, and I knew uh, really the only thing I've ever had an urge to do since then is pain pills for some reason. But I quickly tell myself like you know what happens when you relapse, and it's just the same shit that it always was that you got tired of and hated, and it's just depressing and all this. And I quickly remind myself like how terrible it would be if I did relapse. But my brother, he was still relapsing occasionally. He
Mhm.
wasn't doing it every day. He wasn't like fully hooked, but every now and then, every month or so, maybe he would buy it for a night or 2 nights or something like that. And so we're working for this other company. I think that's probably why his performance was lacking because at this company, um, apparently I was doing great and we had two separate sectors, two different areas we worked for. And apparently he was always kind of lacking. And so they ended up letting him go, um, which was kind of difficult for me because it was like, I have a son now. This is making better money than I've ever made. But I felt like me and my brother, like I said, we were always together. Everything in our life was together. So him getting fired made me feel like I should probably quit as like a loyalty thing. He specifically came to me and told me, don't quit unless you want to. Like there's not going to be any kind of animosity if I get fired and you stay on. So I ended up staying on. He went working for himself and started doing pretty good. But at that point, we kind of started drifting a little bit.
Mm.
Our rooms were 6 feet from each other, but at the same time, he's going doing his own business. I'm doing my own. And then he started dating this woman who she was just bad news. my mom's a police officer, so she knows a lot of police officers, and apparently a lot of police officers know this woman, and apparently someone told her that anytime a new guy starts going to her house regularly, within like a month or two, he's lost a bunch of weight and he's doing illegal things and getting in trouble. And so I didn't realize that at first, but she's kind of like a habitual liar and addict herself. And so I started to kind of get hints of it, but my brother was kind of fully back into doing drugs again. Not sure if it was pain pills or if it was heroin or if it was just a little everything, but it was definitely a regular thing because he lost a bunch of weight, ended up getting in trouble, going to jail. Um, and then he comes out of jail. And for years, I had always kind of like, I'm kind of a to myself person. I've changed a lot. But I've always kind of wanted more space. You know, our lives were so intertwined, and he loved it. You know, he loved me, and not that I didn't love him. I absolutely did, but like he wanted our lives to be as intertwined as possible. And I've just always been the kind of person where like a little bit of space feels a little better.
Mm-hmm.
So for a while there, I was basically telling him like, you know, let's do our own things for a little while because we were bickering and fighting all the time and stuff. Um, and then, like I said, he got into that relationship with that girl. Kind of started getting in trouble, doing drugs again. I and it had been about a month or so since I talked to him about like space, getting space, and you know, I just had this like moment where I was like, man, I miss my brother. So I texted him because I mean, both of us were like better at texting our emotions than talking about them. And so
Sure.
I texted him and I just told him, you know, um, basically that I'd want to start hanging out more and doing things more, and told him how great of a uncle he is to my son and how great of a brother he is because he was just like the fun uncle. Like he's the guy that my son wanted to be around all the time.
Yeah.
Um, because I mean, like I said, he wasn't like even when he was doing drugs, he still had his integrity and he still had his head on straight. He just, you know, would just be doing drugs all the time, basically. Um, and so, you know, even though he was kind of wrapped up in that, he would still thinking straight for the most part and spending a lot of time with my son because we all lived together. And so, you know, I just thought it was so awesome how he became the my son's favorite person in the world, you know.
Yeah.
So I texted him and told him, you know, I love you, you're awesome brother, all this and you know, you've been a great uncle. And then we started talking about like working out again and whatnot. Next time I saw him, he never responded to the text. And I was like, yeah, asshole. He never said anything. He was like, oh, it meant a lot. I just didn't know what to say. But anyway, so uh, I'm working for this company. He's doing his own thing. And he goes to jail for, I don't know, a week. He comes out and wants to have like one last hoorah, where he buys a bunch of Oxycontin. And this was
Mm.
actually the time I relapsed. And I did it with him. And I think we had enough for like a day or something like that, you know, maybe a couple each or something like that. And after it had run out, I was done with it. I didn't want to do it anymore. Like I remembered at that point, you know, just how bad of an idea it is, I guess, and how you don't get anything from it. But he was kind of in that mindset that like I want to get some more. So he was looking for more. He couldn't find any more, and I thought that was that. Um, and so I'm talking to him one night, like I think you know the night he was looking for that, and he just seemed a little off, and I couldn't really put my finger on it. And I, anyways, we get off the phone. I go to work the next day, and I get a call from my son's mom, basically saying that he's not breathing, and he, you know, looks blue or something like that. And
And wait,
And
your son is not
no,
reading
my
anymore?
my brother.
Your
Yeah,
brother.
because
Okay.
it turns out he actually found some heroin, and it was laced with what was
Fentanyl.
that? Yeah, fentanyl. So I was so he besides my son now, he was number one in my life. So I didn't even know what to think, and I was like trying to hurry up and finish work. And the guy who was working for me like touched my shoulder and was like, "Hey, take my vehicle. Like, stop what you're doing. Go home."
Mhm.
And so I go home, and yeah, sure enough, he had overdosed. And I mean that was it. And from there, I decided I could either let it beat me and just break me as a human, or I can have it motivate me. Because he always saw me as way better than I was. So I was like, I'm
So
gonna try
your
and be
brother
that
died
person.
that night.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So so yeah, pretty much I decided, I had my best friend die when I was younger, in like junior high, so I knew what it could do to you if you don't mourn, and you just kind of put it all away. And so I decided I'm gonna mourn the best I can, and I'm gonna make something of myself. Because still at this time I'd been working for this other company for 6 months, but outside of that, we had pretty much never been successful, far from it.
Mhm.
So I just used that as motivation, I guess you could say, and that's when I started this business and started ramping things up, and yeah, now here I am. I mean,
And
there's definitely a lot
how
in
long has it
between
been
those
since he
two.
died?
Uh, I should keep better track,
Well,
but
roughly.
I think 4 or 5 years now.
Well, and thank you for being. This is what's important about the trial story is being vulnerable. And you said you'd had this happen in junior high, so you knew that mourning was important.
Mm.
What what did you do for your grieving process? How did you handle your self-care in that area?
So I've got like the best friends and family. For months I feel like everyone was around me, or I at least always had people around me, and they were going through it themselves, so that helped a lot. But I just like I said, I kind of keep my emotions to myself. I'm a pretty to myself person. I think I'm a lot less now, but that's kind of what I was trying to do, is go against that urge to just bottle it all up. So, if I felt the urge to cry, I would just let myself cry. Um, I would talk about how I was feeling, uh, even if I didn't want to talk about it. 'Cause like I said, I always had someone there. So if I felt that feeling of like, going in instead of letting it out, I would just act on it, and I would do the opposite of what my brain was trying to do. But yeah, I definitely cried a lot, and I definitely talked a lot, and it I actually, when my best friend died when I was younger, it was like 7 years later, and I would still have random times where I just start bawling, and it was always something that was hanging over me, like I was carrying this with me, that my friend died, and I went through this and this trauma. And with my brother, I still obviously feel it pretty strong, but a year and a half after he passed away, I felt like I'm okay. And
Wow.
I think it had a lot to do with letting myself mourn and feel these feelings.
Thank you so much for being here. I know this is not easy. We've had friends pass, and it's just really it's really difficult. And you look at yourself and you say, "What could we did this with a suicide interview too? What could we have done differently? Where could we have been?" But it's also the other side of the process. So what if someone is still stuck with that grief and that mourning and what could I do differently? What would you say to them if they're still reliving that over and over?
Um, I mean, I would definitely say talk about it. If you don't want to talk about it, go find a dark corner of a room somewhere and let yourself cry. Put on a sad song. Like I think crying is so important. Um, like it's just a natural function of our body. Like it's there for a reason.
Mhm.
But I think just like letting yourself, no matter how you got to do it, I think you need to let yourself feel those feelings. And I will say, I went to me and my mom, we went to a couple grief therapy groups.
Mhm.
Um, the first couple were just didn't feel right. And so we kept looking, which I think was a great idea. And we ended up finding a counselor who I've played music my whole life. My mom's a police officer, and this counselor is in a band, and she is an ex-police officer. So we both kind of connected with it.
Yeah.
And then we had a few sessions of like a group grief therapy with her, and then we ended up branching off, and we had like individual therapy sessions, and that helped a lot. Like having someone who understands emotions more than you and walking you through, the process and talking with you. Like I would definitely recommend that to anybody. And I do. If someone's going through something, I tell them like sometimes there's a negative connotation with therapy, but it is so good whenever you need it.
Wow. And I really appreciate you saying, the first couple didn't fit, but I didn't give up.
Yeah.
Because we've also had that experience where sometimes it's not the right fit, but the therapist in the band who was a police officer was the right fit, and you work through some pieces with that. um you said he saw you, your brother David, did I get that right? David saw you as better than you were. Tell us more about that. What is that feeling like?
Um, well, I mean, maybe saying that isn't the right way to put it because I believe we all have endless potential, for the most part. But I think he just saw like when I look at my son, like I see so much in him, and I just see him as so great and so much potential, and I think that's kind of how my brother looked at me. From my perspective, it was kind of like almost like a burden, I guess. It's kind of weird to explain, but I don't know. I felt like it would be hard to live up to what he saw, and actually be that he saw. So while he was around, it for some reason, as much as I appreciated it, it also like kind of I don't know rubbed me the wrong way. Not where I would like get upset or angry with him, but just like I don't know, it just felt like it was going to be hard to ever actually be that, or it felt like it wasn't realistic what he was seeing in me. Um, yeah.
Yeah, that makes actually perfect sense. Like I've been around people like that, and they have this vision of what your potential is, and they're probably more right than we are with our limiting beliefs. But it does seem like a burden. I think that's a good word. It can be, depending on how you feel when you get out of bed in the morning, it can be a real benefit too, to know that somebody believes in you and they're seeing this potential in you. But I can completely empathize with what you're talking about. So after your brother's passing, it's not, if I heard you right, you kind of resolved to try and become more like this person that he saw and build a legacy that he would be proud of. Is that accurate?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And
And
I still try and keep that mindset every day.
so where we left off, if I'm right, you had just left the grout doctor and started your own thing. And where did it go from there?
So after my brother passed, I took off a couple weeks. They were very understanding. They told me like you should take time off. But when I came back, I think the stress of everything, my performance kind of would get worse. I never really had touch ups or callbacks, maybe like once in the whole time I worked there. And then I think I got like three within a couple of weeks. And so the owner tried to lower my commission from 40% to 30%, which is a percent decrease. And I was like, I can't do that. And he said, let me think about this. And then in like the day between him thinking about it and telling me, yeah, never mind, you can keep your pay, I had already gotten motivated. And I was like, you know what? I'm better than this. For my brother, I mean, he's kind of an asshole, to be honest. But my brother told me, not my brother, the owner of the business, kind of a jerk. But my brother told me after he had gotten fired, and it just like rang in my head. After he told me, go ahead and keep working there if you want, but he was like, just don't trust him, Chris. Don't trust him, because there's a couple of things that were a little fishy. And for some reason, I thought about that like every other day, that because he said it so seriously and with such conviction. I was a little worried about that, and then um, so I was already kind of teetering anyways on should I keep doing this or should I just go for it and do my own thing. And whenever he started considering lowering my pay, I decided, I'm just going to do my own thing. So the next day when he told me that we'll keep your pay the same, I told him I'm putting in 2 weeks, and went off. And I remember at the beginning of starting my own business, I was having panic attacks in the middle of working, and I was just feeling so like bad because not only did I have this like stress of I have a son now, my brother just passed away, and I've got a new business, and I'm like barely making it. And just the grief of my brother, I remember doing a backsplash, and just randomly it hit me all of a sudden. I had to like put everything down, and I ran out to my van, and I just started crying on the job site. Um, and that happened quite a few times. Or I'd do an estimate or something like that, and I'd leave, and then I would just be like bawling all the way to where I'm going next. And then I'd have to pull it together and go in there and do what I had to do. But looking back at it now, I don't know how I made it through. Like the feelings that I had when I started the business, it was so rough. I don't even know how to explain it. Like if I were to go through it now, I'd like to think I could do it again, but I would not want to. I think I'd probably be looking for other alternatives if I was dealing with that kind of stress. But I just kept on doing what I could do, trying to basically like optimize or improve like one step at a time. I didn't want to get too crazy and have this big, I'm going to make 10 million this year. Like I just thought about what I can do next. And then I started making goals that were outside of my reach. I remember I thought 8,000 a month in top line revenue was kind of crazy. I was like, I don't think I could do that, but whatever. I'm gonna make that goal. And then I think it was like 2 months later, I hit it. And then I was like, oh wow, this is great. It felt great. Just the fact that I had like a goal to reach,
Yeah.
it was motivating. And so I just kept on doing that. I kept on making these goals that felt a little bit crazy. And I've hit every single one of them. So actually, this last year I was just short, but I'm okay with that. I think that's the right goal. If I am just short of it, or just maybe barely made it there. But yeah, I mean, there's been probably 5 different goals that I've made since that 8,000 a month goal. And I've just somehow reached it, even though it felt like it was unreachable whenever I make the goals.
That's awesome. So those are the stretch goals. And one of the things that we've noticed is the same drive that has addicts go and get whatever they're addicted to, food, drugs, work, sex, whatever, is the same drive that the entrepreneur puts into their business. That when they turn that they flip that switch. I'll get the metaphor right. When they flip that switch, that drive can build this phenomenal business because they already know how to do those things. They already know how to do what's necessary. I'm supposed to say phenomenal all the time, but there we go. Wow, Chris, that's amazing. That's amazing. So let me ask the same question again. What would you say to somebody who often businesses get started? Jerry started his business because he couldn't manage the corporate world was requiring 22 hours a day. And he said, no, I'm not going to do it. So what would you say to people who are like, hey, I want to do this, but I'm scared. I don't feel like I have the background. There's a lot of stress in my life. I mean, you had compound stress upon compound stress and went ahead and did it. So what would you say?
I think, I mean, as long as you can do what you need to do to take care of your responsibilities. Like me taking care of my son, I was able to do that even from the start. And so, I wasn't letting them down. I wasn't, getting us kicked out of our house or anything like that. So I mean, do what you got to do to make ends meet. But I think if you just focus on one thing for long enough, you're gonna excel. And tile is not the easiest business to scale, but I'm figuring it out. And I bet you if we talk again in 2, 3 years, I'll have figured out how to scale this tile business.
All
But
right,
I honestly
let's
think,
calendar it right now.
Yeah, we're gonna put a pin in it and calendar it. I bet he will too, because I've talked to him for the last 4 months. So you went to the counselor to deal with the grief. What other help have you had? Have you read books? Have you talked to mentors? You said your family was all in the trades.
Mhm.
Where did you go for help when you're like, oh my gosh, I need to make 8,000 this month? What do I need to change?
So I have read self-help books since I was honestly, I think probably like 13, which my therapist thought was pretty crazy. Apparently, that's not
Right.
normal. But that's the only thing I've ever liked reading is like books that'll teach me something or self-help books that'll kind of give me a better mindset. So even though I haven't implemented these books, or I didn't when I was younger, I knew kind of like what healthy thinking should look like, at least somewhat. So I knew that. I tried to start implementing some of the things that I read. I um, watched YouTube videos on how to grieve and stuff like that. But I also and like I said, I had great friends and family, so we would kind of help each other grieve. But as far as like reaching the goals, my dad is probably the most successful person in my immediate family, and he has a tile business, so he's been a great mentor. And I've kind of gone out of what he would be comfortable with me doing. So like he'll tell me like, I don't know if you should do that, and I just have a gut feeling, yeah, I should, and I do. And now at this point, he's like, I don't know if you should do that, but you've proved me wrong every other time, so maybe you should.
So
But
you
he's been
got
a great
support
mentor.
from him. Yeah,
Mhm.
awesome. As we're wrapping up, Chris, what what message would you want to give our audience? Is both people who are trying to help people get sober, people who are trying to get sober. What would you want to share with them out of your experience?
Um, I just think if you believe in yourself and your capabilities and you don't give up, and that's whether it's business or getting out of a hole or in with addiction or anything. um I'm always having that mindset and it serves me well. Like I just believe that my mental power is strong enough to overcome anything that I'm facing. And I just try to power through and focus on the same thing until I do.
And you've been amazingly successful doing it. And thank you for sharing with us.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks for your time.
Yeah.
Hi, Sober on Purpose family. Please be sure and subscribe. We have a ton more videos. We have courses coming up. We have a newsletter that comes out weekly. Plus, there is a podcast as well. And for those who are brave enough to really decide they want to move into the future, they want to move into their future self and leave behind the hurts, habits, and hangups that they have struggled with over the last year, I work with extraordinary women who are ready to step in, open their hearts, and find the true self that they can share with their family, their community, and the world. Because it's only when one person changes that the whole world changes. Are you ready to jump into that kind of adventure? Click the links in the show notes and let me know. Let's talk and see if we're the right fit. Again, remember to subscribe, videos, courses, podcasts.